I'll call us to order. And I've gone through as people have joined us with who's on board. And thank you all for coming to the meeting virtually and coming on time. I really appreciate it. And we have an agenda. There's might be a little bit of confusion. So let me just say how I think this meeting's going to go. And then I think I just saw Dave Sprogas's face. Yep.
Yep.
I did.
Sorry, I'm late.
Dave, you're here.
I am here virtually.
All right. So we're going to do the minutes then. One big part of today's meeting is that Mike Sullivan is going to walk us or run us or sprint us through the Water Committee report. And we're going to take some time on that. And this is the first of these committee reports. And I hope that we'll figure out next month what other subcommittee will go next. So Mike and his committee are setting the precedent or the example for other committees to follow. So that we want to get all the subcommittee reports to say, here's what a draft report looks like. More on that in a little bit when I introduce Mike. That's the third item on the agenda. Then the fourth item says Coastal Resilience Report Introductory section. I also, in line with getting a draft of our complete report out there, I wrote a first draft of a preface, and I think it's been circulated. And the idea here is, I think the worst thing for people to react to is a blank piece of paper. It's terrifying. But if people see words on a paper, then they have something to react to. So that's what we're going to see in the Water Committee report: words on a piece of paper or on a computer screen. That's what we're going to see with my preface: words to react to. And we'll talk very briefly on that. And then number 5, where it says resilience, is going to be a discussion about East Beach. And it's my intention that we're going to do that this month, and then we're going to have a special meeting next month. So I don't think we will reach any conclusions on that. This is just a brainstorming first part of a 2-meeting section on that. But no decisions tonight. And then we'll have a next meeting date. So is that okay as an agenda with people? Is there anything else that anyone wants to talk about tonight? No, I don't see any hands raised. So first item is, Amy, thank you for, I see a couple of hands up. Tony.
Hi, John. Hey, just a quick point. So regarding East Beach, I did ask Michael Burris, after our conversation, to put me on the next CRC meeting for a presentation on East Beach. And I think that's planned for the 21st.
Yep, that'd be fine, because we're going to discuss East Beach both tonight and on the 21st. So, yep, that's good to go.
Okay.
Is that all right?
Yes.
And and Mike Yagman, your hand's up too.
Yeah, I don't think I got the your draft of the coastal resilience report. Maybe Michael Burris could resend that, and the other people got it, but I don't think I did.
Okay, noted. All right, no other hands are up. So, Amy, thank you for doing the minutes. I read them. I thought they were very complete, especially the whole discussion on Dave Sprogus's, and I noticed in the minutes there was a link to Dave's presentation. So if you weren't there at our last meeting and you missed Dave had a really complete presentation. It was really excellent. There was a link to his presentation in the minutes. So look at the minutes, you get a link to his. And then there was a really robust discussion afterwards. So, and Amy, I thought, captured that really well. So thank you for those excellent minutes. Are there any comments on the minutes, any omissions or corrections? If not, I'd love a motion to accept them.
Motion to accept as written.
I was looking right at you, Mike, for that motion. Mike Sullivan made the motion. Is there a second? Oh, good. I thought it was going to die for a lack of a second. Dave Sprogus bailed me out. Okay, it's made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed? It
Aye.
is okay.
John, I'm abstaining due to absence.
Pardon me?
I'm abstaining from the.
Oh,
minutes
all right.
because of
Shauna
absence.
is abstaining. Okay. Please note Shauna abstained. Otherwise, the minutes are approved. Now, before Mike gets into his subcommittee report, I think the purpose here is that each, our goal is to write a report to give to the select board. And as I said, it's impossible, not impossible. It's very difficult to react to a blank piece of paper. But if you have something down on paper, then everyone has an opinion, and it's easier to engage. And so getting that draft, and if you've looked at Mike's report, there's this word draft in big letters on every page. You can engage with it. You can say, wow, this is great. Or I don't like the way this is phrased. Or, hey, Mike, you missed this point. But you have something to react to. And the other thing is that we've had these 6 different subcommittees that are off doing their own thing. And when we get all 6 subcommittee reports, we can start saying, well, our goal is to get a single report to the select board. And we can start to say, what kind of format do we want so that it looks like one report from the Climate Resilience Committee. So, Mike, you are doing, I read it, I think it's awesome. You are doing a great service because you're first out of the gate and you're setting a standard, which is a pretty damn high bar, I think, for everyone who follows. And you're putting something out there that now people can react to, and they can add to, they can suggest changes. Jeff Canton has already said, here's some changes I think should be made. So the process is already happening, which is just what should happen. So with that, Mike, do you want to start to walk us through it?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, John. And I do know that technique. It's called give somebody a reputation to live up to. So that's not lost on me, John. and by the way, I don't want to say that I'm not the first. I know Phil has put together a real good summary of his problems from a human health standpoint, and Joseph is I saw his draft on the agricultural. So I'm not alone, but I don't mind being the first to jump into the hopefully not a circular firing squad here. So what I did is I just prepared a couple of slides. I have the report that we can walk through if you'd like, but I thought I would talk about. Here we go. Let me just do this. I thought I would just talk about how we got to where we are here. If I can pull up the right screen. Now, do you see that cover page, Climate Resiliency
Yeah.
Committee?
I do. So
Okay, great. There we go. So, should be able to just click, right? How do I advance? Oh, there we go. Okay. So you all know this, the subcommittees that John set up here. And of course we're most of us, and it's not just me, by the way, this is a team effort to come up with this report. We're on the water subcommittee. And when this first started, when John put these categories out there, I was kind of splitting hairs a little bit about, are those the right categories? But I've come around to appreciate the value there. And just as a comparison, here's this is from the state resilient mass plan for 2023. And you can see they kind of break up the problem into a number of segments, if you will, smaller bites to be taken. So, we don't all have a written mission, but we sort of presumed a mission here. And that was to assess the existing and future global warming, climate change. And I use those terms interchangeably. You'll see why later. Water-related drivers and risks to Westport, and to advise the committee and the Board of Selectmen on those issues. This is an ongoing effort that will be offering action and study recommendations. A lot of it in the beginning is just going to be studying to try to understand how these drivers affect us. We hopefully will get into some monitoring and follow up on some projects. But it's, as I said, it's an ongoing effort here, and the whole science of it is changing. So it's something that we have to keep track of, and of course periodically report. So there's our presumed mission there. Today, the objective, I guess, of the initial report is to just kind of put a stake in the ground and just to say where we think we are today with regard to these risks and the drivers that cause them, and to suggest an initial course of action. And again, as I said, mostly study. The format of the report that we chose includes an introductory section that basically talks about the subcommittee mission and its members. We have a short, I think a page background statement on global warming and climate change. And then we break the report up into sections, and we color code them because it gets confusing when you're going through all these different drivers and risks. But this sort of yellow colored stuff identifies sections that talk about drivers. Drivers meaning, and we'll go over those, but it's like sea level rise is a driver. Warming oceans is a driver. And then we talk about how those manifest themselves into specific risks for Westport. So sea level rise, for example, presents a risk as far as coastal properties in one case. And then the green sections have to do with our action items or areas of further study. So just as you go through our work, you'll see that color coding continues. One of the things we did is to try to break this problem up. I have the curse of being a mechanical engineer. So, and we always say a problem well-defined is half solved. So we've kind of broken this problem up into its individual components. And those include localized climate change. How is our climate changing? There's a separate problem that is episodic with regard to storm severity and frequency. And you have another problem called sea level rise. On top of that, and part of that is our warming. That causes a whole slew of issues and concerns. There's ocean acidification, and there's the potential that we'll have major changes to some of the major currents like the Gulf Stream. So those are the 6 things that we said, how do these things individually or collectively affect us in Westport? And we came up with a whole bunch of problems, and we tried to sort of consolidate them and sort them and prioritize. And this is what we end up with. And this is a weighted list, if you will. So number 1 problem that received the most votes is sea level rise and its impact on private property and structures. Number 2 was erosion, cobbling, and breaching of barrier beaches and dunes. Number 3 was the health of the river system itself, salt mark degradation, and a number of other issues. Number 4 was the potential effect on the water table, the sea level rise being a driver in this case, as well as the septic systems. Number 5, we concerned about the navigability of the river. Number 6 is fish, lobsters, all other species that may be affected by these drivers, warmer water, such as it is. And number 7 was the health of our salt ponds. So we brainstormed on all of those problems and came up with what we thought were solutions, or not solutions, but solution trajectories. What should we be doing to address them, or what should we be doing to further study them? I just sort of had a page here where I said, where are we in this report? I think we're mostly done with the drivers. And we have a little bit of work to do with, each driver. We would like to try to, again, put a stake in the ground and quantify it if it can be quantified. Sea level rise. What is the actual history? What are the projections? What should we be using as a model there? On the risks, I think we're done defining the risks for the most part. We have a little bit of quantification on timeline and such for each of those. And again, the recommendations, this whole thing is going to be ongoing, but I think we've got pretty much most of the initial recommendations for either action items or ongoing study. So that's the process that we used. And I pulled from this process some wider recommendations that we might consider. Now, we're writing a report so that it is self-contained. It can be read in and of itself, but we don't want every subcommittee, I don't think, trying to reinvent the wheel on an introduction, a definition of the problem, and so forth. So I just thought maybe the committee might consider looking at this first section here where we talk about global warming, climate change drivers, the 6 drivers that we've identified, and maybe having a common narrative there, or a common set of parameters or problem definition statements to be working towards. And I also think that what we come up with for the final report, the whole committee comes up with for a final report, really it serves as a repository for knowledge as people come into this work group. It should be kind of kept up to speed, and they can quickly get up to speed on what the committee's been doing and what we might consider doing in the future. I also think the more, as I looked into these different drivers, we might consider, John, assigning an individual in each case to be sort of a subject matter expert on, for example, sea level rise. There's just a lot of material out there. Somebody becomes an expert, they can sort of sort through this and give us their best estimate of what the latest science is and stay on top of that. And that would be, and sea level rise and the 5 other drivers. I just think that might be helpful as a committee. And those are these 6 drivers here. So localized climate change, severity of storms, sea level rise, warming oceans, and so forth. So that's the format that we used for this report. And I'd be willing to, glad to go over any part of the report. But I thought we should start with that, just to tell you why the report looks the way it does, and hopefully solicit some suggestions from you all.
So thank you, Mike, very much. And the first thing I would do is encourage everyone, if you haven't read the draft of the Water Subcommittee report, I urge you to read it. There's a lot in it, a lot of work from Mike's subcommittee in it. So I urge you to read it. But if anyone has questions of Mike on it, raise your hand and I'll try and get to you.
By the way, I want to say one more thing, John. When I did a little research on what we could pull together as a preface, and again, thinking about a public-facing document, and this is not a public-facing document, by the way. Jeff did point out that this is a little technical, but when I thought about a public-facing document, that's kind of where I got the background for, just a sort of a short definition of what the problem is climate change. But I was very interested to learn that this woman, Eunice Newton Foote, is really the first person to put her finger on this problem, and not as a problem, future problem, because in 1856, they didn't imagine that we would be pushing out as much CO2 as we have. But she was the first person to figure out that CO2, unlike a lot of other gases, captures a lot of heat. And she did a little paper on this. You look her up, it's pretty interesting. She didn't present the paper at, I think it was the American Scientific, some gathering of scientists. She had her husband or a colleague, a male colleague, present this, because at the time she wouldn't have been taken so seriously. But there you go. A woman was the one that started this whole thing.
And that's really at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution,
Right. Right.
when the problem really of man-made emissions was just at the beginning. I mean, that was one comment I had, is that I thought in the preface, I might lay a common base for all the reports, and your introduction, and I found that part of it really very good, but I thought that could serve as an introduction for all the reports, and maybe some of that might be better in either an introduction to the report. Maybe there should be an introduction to the report and a preface. I don't know. But I thought that introduction could be common to all the reports. And so maybe there's a preface and an introduction, and then you get into the committees. But that's something for maybe Jeff's committee to figure out when we get a little further down the road. How does this overall report lay out? I think what you're saying is there's a role for the whole report, and then there might be roles for each of the subcommittee reports as specific handouts. Like in an ag report, Ray and Joseph might be taking those to, different ag meetings, saying, here's what we're doing in ag, where you wouldn't want the whole report, but you might want the ag committee report. So, Tony, you got a question or a comment? Your hand is up.
Yes. Can you hear me, John?
Yes, I can.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, so I was looking at the report. My comment was on the sea level rise section. So here, there's the RCP 8.5 projections, and then the measured data from Woods Hole, the graph that is shown there. And so my concern is, because the water committee, our recommendations concerning, various shoreline kind of things, sea level rise is a component of those recommendations, right? And because there's a pretty big difference between what the model is projecting and what is measured. I think it's like a 7x projection. So, for example, in the time frame between 2008 and 2030, the sea level rise would be something like 2.5 inches with a linear projection based on Woods Hole data, right? So that data is available from from 1935-ish to current. But the model shows like 1.3 feet in that time frame. So it's off significantly. So this is because this is foundational to, shoreline impacts, river impacts, anywhere where the water meets the land. I think this is important that it's covered. And I know that there was also a section on RCP 8.5 itself, not a section of the report, but a presentation, sorry, that Dave Sprogus did. I just think that it might be important to maybe even have an appendix or some just note that, where we indicate that that there's a divergence here, and maybe even a recommendation for using an alternative, right? Or maybe doing it both ways, right? If the state's mandating one, we can do it that way, but then we can do it with what is considered the most likely scenario. There was actually a lawsuit that came out, I think it was this year, where there was some environmental issues and there was a regulatory agency using worst case scenarios in drafting their regulation. And it went to court, and the court ruled that that they can't use the worst case, most pessimistic scenarios in crafting regulation. They had to use the most likely or best scientific scenarios. But this is exactly what's being discussed here with the sea level rise.
So Tony, as I mentioned, and I can't remember whether you attended our last meeting or not, did you?
No, I didn't, but I
Yeah.
did see.
So we,
Yeah.
if you read the
Presentation.
minutes, and as I alluded to, Dave made an excellent presentation, and then we had a very robust discussion on just the point you raised. And what I don't want to have it again tonight. We had it 2 months ago. And what I do want to do, though, because it's an important point, and I am going to talk about it a little under the next agenda item, is to say that on the topic of projections, we do need to address this issue in the report. And if you don't mind, I'd like to come back to the point you're raising in the next agenda item. Is that all right with you, Tony?
Sure.
Okay. Let's do that. Phil.
Thanks. So I agree that well, first of all, I really liked Mike's report. I think if we were going to get down to specific comments, on particular sections, it would help to, or even just some of the word choice, if that was something that was open to discussion, it would really help to have like a word is converted into a Word document, which I think it was a previous draft was. So you could put comments in or make suggestions rather than trying to do it in this kind of format. But I think, so that's one thing. I think extracting out the introductory part and making that part of a report is also valuable. And that relates to the question that was touched on, or the issue that was touched on a little before, which is who is the audience for this report, and kind of what is its function? Because I looked at in your preface, John, where you were saying, here's the charges that the select board gave to the committee, and so when we started this off, in some way I thought, okay, well, we're preparing a report for the committee. I mean, for the select board. And that's really our audience. And it's since kind of morphed into something that is kind of amorphous as it relates to what we're doing as far as outreach goes. And again, as your preface suggested, you know, that we need to have this robust discussion with all these different sectors of the community. And so I'm still unsure about, you know, about how, what the function of this report is, or what, are we answering questions that the select board posed, or are we in this general educational mode of things? And to that extent, what do we want to propose? Very specific solutions, or do we want to leave that more open to the public? So
let me you've raised 2 points that are very different points. The first one is Mike's report would be easier to interact with if it was a Word document. Mike, is that possible?
It is, yeah. I'll send a Word version out, and the only thing that will be different, Phil, is that I'll remove all the color because it's in the way of the text. It's just the way I had to do it. I know when we get down to brass tacks, I'm sure Michael or somebody will have a better way to do this. I'll take care of that. Send that out.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, because I don't necessarily think we need all the graphics in it. You know, whatever's the easiest thing for you, to do. But to the extent that we're trying to drive towards a finished product, and I'll just hold off my other comment related to the what model we use until you talk about it, the next time.
All right.
Time, John.
So the first one is we're trying to encourage interchange among groups. So if a Word document does that, Mike Sullivan and Michael Burris will figure out how to make that a Word document and get that circulated so that people can give comments more easily. Good suggestion, Phil. The second one in audience, and let me give my reaction, and then Shauna can correct me if I have it wrong, is that I think there are 2 audiences. You're correct, Phil, that our direct audience is the select board. And if it were only the select board, then we might write it one way. But I think there is implicit in the charge from the select board that there would also be public engagement. And either before or after it goes to the select board, there will be direction to have public meetings and have the public react to the report. And so it also has to be written so that there can be engagement with public meetings. So I think there are 2 audiences, both the select board and the Westport community at large. Now, Shauna, do I have that right or do I have it wrong?
That's how I would think about it. Yeah, the select board isn't going to compile another report to talk to the community about it. We would want you all to do that. So I think it's this group should assume it's not just the select board might be making specific recommendations under our control, but I think the report would be a community report.
Okay. Thank you. Jim White, you've got your hand up.
Hi. I think the report is great, and it spurs me on to finish the stuff that I'm supposed to contribute to it. And what I would like to have everybody consider is I think this report format is great for educational purposes for the select board and the citizens of the town. But there's going to be recommendations on something to mitigate something quickly. So, for instance, I know the harbor master is talking with the Army Corps of Engineers to dredge the harbor. So that comes under the rubric of the subcommittee that was talking about harbor navigability. Second, when they dredge, they're going to have a lot of dredged material. And currently they're planning on dumping it in the ocean. And I think that we should have some kind of direct recommendation that they should stockpile that dredged material that could be used for beach nourishment. And we certainly need beach nourishment in Westport. And secondly, it could be used for thin layer deposition on the marshes. So I think something like that has to come separately from the report. And I wanted to see if anybody would concur.
Well, I don't want to get into a long modification of recommendations because that's not the purpose of tonight. And we don't have time. We've got another big agenda item as well. But that is an example of what getting this report out into the whole committee is about, that these kind of recommendations can start to get introduced into the whole report. And I think this just shows the magic of getting it out there, is that it starts to spur these kinds of suggestions. So thank you, Jim, for that. Sean, you've got your hand up, Sean Leach. You're on mute, Sean.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, two things. One thing is, just real quick, fresh water. Seems to be lacking addressing the freshwater bodies in this town, streams, ponds, lakes, if you will. Just not sure if that was considered. Second thing is informational. The legal advertisement for the dredging of the harbor was in the paper last week. There's a 21-day comment period, which ends in 2 weeks. I'm writing a letter as the chair of the beach committee as far as beach nourishment, but I highly recommend that either the committee or somebody get to it real soon because it runs out and they won't consider any public comment after that 21-day period.
Thank you, Sean, very much. Good information. Tony, you're up to bat again. Or maybe not, your hand's down. I guess that was left over.
I'm here.
Oh, all
Sorry,
right.
John.
Yeah.
It's me. I was wondering if Sean could send out to the folks on the call when he gets a chance, information on how we can comment on that the dredging issue.
I'll get that out to the committee. I'll send a mass email. I guess I'll probably do it tomorrow regarding it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
or
you,
you
Sean.
could do it to Michael or Amy, and she can get it to the whole committee, Sean. That's
Yeah,
easier.
Okay.
John, if you just send it to us, we'll send it out.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, I really like the Jim's suggestion on reusing the dredge materials. You know, it's a very good suggestion.
Mike Sullivan.
Just a quick question for Sean Leach. Is the new channel going to be dredged? I mean, is the channel going to be dredged in the current location or in the old location?
It calls for, and I'll quote the report, a 10.3 acre area of Westport Harbor. That's what's being dredged down to 6 feet below mean lowest water, which means if it's lower than that, they won't be dredging any lower. And with the spoils to be dumped off Horseneck Beach. That's the way it's listed in the paper. There's no mention of the channel itself. I think it's more of the harbor. I don't know if it's 10.3 acres, the whole harbor, what that entails.
Understood.
All right, so what I'd like to do is move on. Mike, thank you very much. This is an important step in getting a chapter out to everyone for reactions. And it's a big step. So Dave Sprogas just said, great job, Mike. I want to underline that like 5 times.
It's not just me, guys. We got a whole committee of folks. And I appreciate
understand.
that.
And so when we get to the next meeting date on the agenda, part of that discussion is which chapter goes next. And as Mike said, the health subcommittee has written a lot, and the ag committee has written a lot. And so between now and when we get to the last item on the agenda, Phil, Ray, and Joseph can think about who might want to go next, and we'll flip a coin or arm wrestle virtually or something when we get to the last item on the agenda about who might want to go next. But let me get to the issue of the preface. That was sent out with the same idea that once it gets distributed to everyone, everyone can take whacks at it and say, here's how it can be improved. And I've gotten comments from Jeff Canton on how it can be improved. But the thing that it immediately raised the issue as I wrote it is I had to start putting in projections, which gets to the point Tony raised, and which was the subject of a lot of discussion at the last meeting. And so what I think is clear, and Phil wrote me saying, you know, the projections you use in the preface have to be the same projections we use in the health report and the same projections we use in the water committee report. I mean, otherwise the reader's going to say, do you guys talk to each other? And we lose all credibility. So the report has to be consistent about whatever projections we use. And so how do we, and I couldn't agree more. So again, my preface is a draft, and what it says in terms of projections, what it says in terms of describing problems, what it says in terms of any recommendations, all have to reflect the work in every report. And so what I see happening is as we start to get these reports circulated, all these reports start talking to each other, including the preface, and they all become informed by each other, and they all become consistent as they talk to each other. And so it looks at the end like one report written by one committee. But to begin with, it's, you know, a bunch of different people writing things, so that it'll look different. It'll have different type styles, and it'll have different information, but that won't be what it looks like at the end. So it's a draft. But in terms of the issue of projections, I think, as you could read in the minutes, different people had different ideas about what projections we should use. And why would that not happen? We're a bunch of different people with different ideas about this. And I think we're going to, as a committee, have to agree on what projections to use. And a number of people made the argument that we should use the projections the state uses. So I think at next month's meeting, we should make a decision. And I don't expect a unanimous vote, but I think we should make a decision by a vote on what projections we're going to use, and then we should live with whatever we decide. But I think it's imperative that we have a consistency among all the chapters, and that we not argue about this every meeting, so that we can just get that thing done. So here's my suggestion, that we schedule a decision on this next month so we can think about it. And the decision is, at every meeting, we've had meetings of official members of the CRC and guests, and I've never differentiated in terms of discussion between who's a member and who's a guest. But in terms of what the projections are, that'd be a vote of people who are members of the CRC. So if you're not sworn in yet, get sworn in between now and next month, and we'll have a vote. Does that seem? I do think we've got to have consistent projections. I don't think we can write a report without projections. I just think whether it's number of days of heavy precipitation or number of days of heat over 90 degrees, or how much sea level rise between now and 2075, you just need to have something. Otherwise, you can't make the argument that Mike so eloquently made about why are we doing this work. You need to have some projections. So I think that's the best way to do it. And so that was my plan, to make that decision next month. If people think that's a bad plan or have a better plan, let me know between now and next month, and we'll come up with it. But I don't want to spend a lot of time, because I think discussing East Beach is more important use of our time tonight. So, Tony. Nope. John.
Hi. Oh, sorry, John.
Tony, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to check. I think if we did go for a vote, I would just encourage everyone that's going to chime in to make sure they review David's presentation.
Yeah, I agree. It's a good presentation, and review the discussion in the minutes after the presentation. Okay, right. The next item is discussion on East Beach, and here's as I said at the outset, I'd like to spend 2 meetings on this. And the select board asked us for our ideas, and they asked the planning board for the planning board's ideas, and on what to do with East Beach. And ideas was in plural. And so what does that mean? It means more than one. So I think we should discuss tonight any ideas that people want to put on the table, and let's see where it goes. Maybe we'll get 3 ideas. Maybe we'll get 23 ideas. I don't know. Maybe the ideas we get will fall into general categories. Maybe they won't. Let's just see what different people think. And then next month on March 21st, we'll have a chance. And I know, Tony, you wanted to give a presentation. I think, Kevin, you may have said you wanted to give a presentation, or maybe that's to the planning board. We can refine those ideas for presentation to the select board. So we don't have to make any decisions tonight. Tonight is just, what do people think might be a reasonable approach to the 4 storms we've had, this year so far, and whatever's going to happen in the future. Michael Burris, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, just real quick before you launch into the sort of brainstorming session, I just want to provide some context on what we're going to be producing for the select board.
Yeah.
So, as you had said, we were asked to come up with some solutions, but as a larger part, it's as a larger document, it's going to be a report to the select board about, outlining existing conditions, scoping out the problem, defining what kinds of regulatory structures are in place on East Beach, developing a set of approaches to sea level rise, and so on. And so what the planning office is doing is we're pulling together information from multiple town departments. So, for example, I've been working a lot with conservation, building, the assessors, pulling together different data points to put in that report. We're also going to provide a summary to the select board of prior work that was done. So, as for example, the East Beach MVP, and then for any of the data that needs to have a more, have more data that might need to be mapped, I'll be doing that as well. And so the point of this is to provide the select board a general overview of all the forces at play at East Beach, and so they get a holistic picture of not just the natural forces, but the regulatory forces as well. And then I think it would also be a good idea to also just at the end of the report acknowledge that there are some other at-risk areas that aren't part of the scope of the report, but further analysis as well. So everyone's got that, kind of at the forefront. And so what we'll be doing is we'll be forwarding this report to the planning board, which would then get sent to the select board. And where I'm at with this right now is I'm working with different departments to figure out which regulations are at play at East Beach. So John, I just wanted to jump in really quick and provide that context for some folks who didn't know. So I'll turn it over back to you.
So Dave Sprogus said, can we recite the current policy with regard to East Beach before discussing alternatives? Is there a current policy? Michael, do you know?
I don't think there's a current policy for East Beach per se, but there are various regulatory structures that apply to East Beach. So whether it be floodplain permitting or rules for the Conservation Commission, those will all be detailed in the report. I don't think there is a defined policy for what the town should do for East Beach. I think there's been recommendations, but not anything that's really been formally submitted to the select board.
Okay, I want to begin because hold on a sec. I gotta get back to my little map here. Dave has his hand up, but because the select board has asked both us and the planning board for suggestions, let me just start by asking Jim White and the chair of the planning board what their approach is to this request by the select board.
So I think Michael did a good job in reviewing what we're considering. The other thing that I don't know if it was David or Kevin asked, what's the current what's the current policy from the town standpoint? And that is something that it's I am not sure if we know it completely right now. I think there's a history here that has sometimes been contentious and sometimes gone to court. And so I think we need to compile a short story of what the history is and what the current administration feels is the policy, because I don't think I know, and I don't think Michael knows what the policy is right now.
Has I know the planning board has had at least one meeting, well attended by folks with some discussions. Has the planning board come up with any alternatives yet, or that's still in the works?
No, I think we're just trying to get our feet wet on what exists today and what the policy has been and what the policy is currently. and then try to sort it all out and see what we really have on the plate. I had a long conversation with Phil Weinberg, and he sent me a lot of good information about what he could find. And so we're still trying to compile stuff. And we're trying to, as Michael said, put all this stuff on a map so that anybody can look at it and say, okay, well, this is what we have now. And then I think we need to understand what the law is with regard to high water, low water, and erosion of property on the shore and accumulation of property on the same shore. So I'm sure there is a lot of case law, but I'm sure there is some law that's left over from colonial days that deals with this. And so we need to just compile everything before we make any kind of determination of what we would consider a recommendation.
Thank you, Jim. So I've got a couple of hands up. If people have ideas for what they think we should be recommending to the select board, raise your hand and I'll get to you. Dave, you were first with your hand up. Dave Sprogus.
Yeah, thanks, John. My understanding is that material cannot be removed, and if I recollect, there are even signs on East Beach that say that the material, the cobblestones, cannot be removed. And I guess what I meant by my question earlier, can we recite the current policy? I was under the assumption that what Westport was doing today was within the law, which would prevent removal. Am I wrong about that? Is my understanding correct that you cannot remove material? And so wouldn't the default position be to put it back where it came from after a storm?
Michael, do you have an answer for that?
I hesitate to answer it just because I don't have a full picture of all the issues at play from Chris Capone, and so I don't want to speak for the Conservation Commission, I guess. So I'm be more than happy to get with Chris Capone and get you that answer, David.
I don't need it personally.
Well,
I
think I can contribute.
Who, Phil? Is that Phil?
Yeah. I mean,
Go
I
ahead,
can say, so we issued, that is, I'm on the Conservation Commission. The Conservation Commission issued a letter to all the owners of East Beach parcel that laid out what the conditions were for beach restoration. And I can discuss that, but what I can say is that, so like at our next meeting, there may be a half a dozen proposals from lot owners to begin beach restoration. And one of the key pieces of requirements is that you have to restore compatible material. And for East Beach, that is really sand and cobble. And so there was, I think what you're referring to, Dave, is that there were individuals who were coming along in the period of time when East Beach is vacant, of removing cobbles from the beach for their own purposes. And so there was a regulation and maybe a bylaw that made it illegal to remove cobbles from the beach. But what's going on now is that individual owners are moving forward to restore and to regrade their property. And what has happened here is an extreme, on these storms, is an extreme example of what happens on a regular basis. And so there are lot owners now who have obtained approval from the Conservation Commission over, we issue, I think, 3-year approvals to restore the, to nourish their beach. So that is really what's going on now. And I'm assuming that people are going to be trying to be ready for submitting their permits, so they can reoccupy in May. The other thing that's going on is that there were septic tanks that were damaged to different degrees, and we've required that are now wearing my Board of Health hat. We've required inspections of all those septic tanks. Some lot owners are considering moving their septic tanks further from the beach. So that is a whole nother regulatory piece. But I think what I see, is individual lot owners taking the existing pathways to restore their properties in the relative near term. That's just a handful right now, or maybe 2 handfuls, but that's what's happening at the moment.
Can I just?
Thanks, Phil.
Can I
Oh,
just?
sorry.
Thanks, Phil. Shauna, you're my co-chair, so of course you can
I'm
butt
trying
in
to jump out
anytime
of
you
order,
want.
but I think one of the reasons that a select board kind of punted over to different other committees is that it's not like a policy that we're talking about. There is a string of policies and lack of policies. So I think Phil did a great job explaining some of the ones that we're looking at. But like, for example, one of the things that was brought to us was, what does the highway department do when they're clearing the road, right? And so we have a responsibility to make passable roads. We have a responsibility to protect the town assets. That's an evacuation route we have a responsibility for. And also the property owners, it's not good for anybody to remove that material from the beach. So we look at how should the highway department respond when, the road is covered with rocks and rubble, and we didn't really know a good answer. So that's actually one of the reasons that we wanted to talk with you all about, because we don't know. And so I think when you talk about what's the current policy, there's so many policies. That's what we're trying to get our arms around.
Yeah, so just in quick follow-up, my question was very limited. I appreciate all of the detail, particularly Phil, around septic and all of that, but really the very specific question I had to do with material that washes up onto the road, which the town is obligated to the people of the town to take off the road. But taking off the road can be done in many different ways. And my simple question was, doesn't the default position make sense to just sort of push it off? Like, it's kind of like snow, you just plow it off to the side. I know easier said than done, but let the property owners work out with the town the things that they want to do with it to restore their property. I'm not questioning that. I'm just saying, leave the material in the general location where it came from, get it off the road, but don't haul it off. Leave it in proximity on the verge so that the property owners have material to do the work they want to do. It's not gone forever. That was my only point.
So I would say, just to answer that, the default is to keep the material there. They pushed it down to the road to shore up the road. They did move some over to Gooseberry to shore up the landing over there on Gooseberry. So is that too far? I don't know. Is that the right policy? I don't know. Like, once you've shored up the roadway, it's inconsistent. That's why we're looking for a policy. There's the people that own property down there are confused because our response is not consistent. We don't have a consistent policy, but I think there is at one point, Chuck, that hundreds of truckloads were being removed. That simply isn't true. We were pushing a lot of stuff around into a lot of different areas, but it's not like it went to some secret site. But we're so inconsistent about how we actually do that. We need to give the highway department and the emergency responders direction. And so we need a policy. We need a more specific policy. The neighbors have proposed one. And we absolutely need to look at that. But the default right now is they're doing the best they can to shore up the roads that are being in danger, and then to try to leave the material there. But I know the neighbors had to really push to get more material left on their plots. But that's one of the reasons we're here, David.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shauna. Tony, you're next.
Yeah, there's a lot of topics being addressed. Things that moving very quickly in the discussion. One of the things I wanted to discuss that I think is very important in framing the discussion for East Beach is making sure that we understand the factual situation concerning what's happening on the beach, right? So a couple of pertinent facts that I just wanted to raise that I think are important in framing everything else that follows from a policy perspective is number one, but it's based on even the report that Mike has proposed. Sea level rise as measured at Woods Hole is 0.116 inches per year, right? So it's 1/10 of an inch per year. So it's a very small and slow sea level rise. The second point that I want to make comes from the shoreline survey data. So when we compiled the MVP report, both we and the MVP and also Woods Hole analyzed what was going on with the shoreline by looking at overlaid shoreline surveys. And the shoreline survey information indicated that essentially from the time that the causeway was installed in the 30s or late 30s, early 40s, to about 1978, there was about 200 feet of sand that was lost through beach erosion. And then in the era from about 1978 till now, the shoreline has essentially been in stasis, moving slightly in or out, but essentially, mostly on top of itself, right? So when I hear folks indicating, well, the beach is disappearing, right? That's actually not factual based on the information we have. And so I think in order to have a discussion on the future of East Beach, you have to start with a correct factual understanding of what's happening with the beach currently. So I was just providing this information to frame the discussion.
I'm not sure those facts are facts, but let's move along. Kevin, you're next.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to sit with you in your discussion tonight, and I look forward to participating more fully on the next meeting. Obviously, this is an issue that's near and dear to both me and Tony because we live there. And, the coastline, and East Beach Road, has been compromised in our concern, in our eyes, more so by the current practices than by sea level rise. To allude to David's point and the question of where is the material going, it's not leaving the ecosystem, but it's definitely being relocated to other areas up and down East Beach, leaving the part of the road which is adjacent to property owners as vulnerable as the property owner's property themselves. In some cases, tight tanks, septic tanks, I heard Phil say, we're all working on possibly moving them and repairing them. I'm going to meet with Matt next Tuesday to walk the beach and do a good examination and let people know exactly what needs to be done, because I myself, along with Len Potter and others, can get right in there and make the necessary repairs for these people. So the point I'm trying to make is we need to come up with a policy that's consistent in protecting the entire road, not just the parts of the road that are in the town's best interest. I know that the landing needed some shoring up because you had some compromise on the road there. We know that the road needed some shoring up as it led to the town beach because it buckled in a couple of spots. No one disputes that. However, the material that was left behind, and we're in the process of pushing back to assess where we're at, you know, it's not what was there before the storm. And what we're trying to do is work with conservation. We've got everyone on the south side of the beach with notices of intent, and we're working on getting everyone, even on the north side, to have that notice of intent to be in compliance with state laws and the Conservation Commission guidelines. Now, you know, we want to be able to work with the town to solve a problem, but, you know, how do we go about trying to solve that problem? Where, you know, do we nourish the beach? You know, we know it's a short-term solution until something else can be found, but it might be better than trying to throw up our hands and saying, gee, maybe do we retreat? You know, retreat isn't an option for those of us that are there. We would like to see some sort of emphasis on some sort of nourishment. At the last planning board meeting, you guys mentioned the possibility of some grant money from Buzzards Bay. And, you know, Mark had talked to you guys about that potential to possibly acquire the lots that might need it in the future on a voluntary basis. Is there a way we can work together to try and maybe get these grants to try and help nourish the beach and replenish what's gone, has disappeared? You know, the DEP policy clearly states that it shouldn't be relocated. It should be put back where it came from. You got a delicate situation because the town has a responsibility, but there also are clear-cut federal and state guidelines on what to do with that material. You know, there's always the possibility of, you know, requesting a determination from the Conservation Commission as to where they stand on this. You know, so that's something that could be brought to everybody's attention and maybe force the people involved to play by the rules. And, you know, I want to work with everyone to solve this problem, just like everybody else here tonight. And, you know, I look forward to being an active part of this entire discussion so we can figure out what we're going to do in regards to potential sea level rise, beach nourishment, protecting property rights, protecting the interests of the town. These are all important issues that we have to work on together. And I'd like to thank you guys for the opportunity to at least share a little bit of my thoughts with you.
Thank you, Kevin, very much. And as I said at the beginning, I don't see us coming up with one recommendation for the select board. I see us coming up with several, so the select board has choices to make. I mean, there might be one option, which is whatever the current policy is, just keep doing it. Another might be what you were talking about, Kevin, with the coalition, some form of managed retreat that allows us to stay there, you know, a long time, but still allows for eventual retreat. There might be several. All right, Kevin, you need to lower your hand. There we are. Sean.
Okay, so being a little bit familiar with this, obviously to cut to the chase here, we need to come up with options. Options are do as we do always and move and leave it like that. Option is abandon the road. Option is keep the road. Those are the three options I think we need to kind of concentrate on, not get into who's doing what, where, and when, because everybody on that beach is doing something wrong. So let's just get to a point where we come up with a solution moving forward, as this is only going to get worse before it's better. And eventually someone at the state is going to wave the wand and say no more for anybody. So I think, you know, accusing, pointing, and doing all these kind of things, everybody's trying to do the best job they can. Let's just come up with a solution.
Short to the point. All right, Mark Rasmussen, people have been talking about the coalition. You must know something about the coalition, Mark. You're on
You know,
mute, though.
to
You're
bring her
not
in.
going to hear anything as long as you're on mute.
Some days I think, yeah. So I wanted to respond to Kevin and Tony, and particularly about the East Beach, the Gooseberry Causeway study we have going on, and just the timing on that. Because I think, so for background, just remind everybody, because it's been 2 years since we started. 2 years ago, we started a 3-year study to look at the question of what's happening with sand and erosion in this whole section of coast. You know, basically from the Westport River all the way over the Slocum River. We are about 6 months from being able to have some real answers out of that study. So our researchers are BU, Virginia Institute of Marine Science, a really great collaborative that's been working on this a lot. Did for 2 years of intense data collection. And for this discussion, some of the things that are going to come out of it, we've specifically, they are producing a big oceanographic model to answer the question of where is sand going on this section of beach? Why is it moving around? Why have we lost it in some spots? Why are some spots being choked in with too much sediment, like the Westport River Inlet, to sort of understand how sand is moving, how we got to this situation, and then what is projected to move forward. So it's a model as well as a look back, which is great. We are specifically asking the model the question of what is the relative impact of the Gooseberry Causeway, because that has always been a concern, mine included. What did the causeway do? What is it still doing? The model is going to have answers for that, not solutions, answers for that question. It's the most detailed science that's ever been done on this section of coast and these questions. And it's really been, a lot of people have been reaching out to me about it. I just want to, how frustrating it is to watch these storms this February and not have the results yet. We're like this close. So we know from BU just this week, they will have a model that we can start sharing with this committee, with everybody, with the whole community, in about 6 months. So it's, that'll go by quickly, yes, but a lot of these, it's not going to help all these immediate concerns everybody has about the lots today. But I think it is going to really help with the long-term planning. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Do you want to talk about the suggestion that Kevin talked about voluntary buyout?
Yeah, completely unrelated to the gooseberry study. So completely different idea. We do a lot of land purchasing for conservation around the bay. And so I had this idea. I've talked to Jim Whiten about it. I briefly talked to Michael Burris about it. The MVP program, which has funded a lot of this work, has signaled very strongly that they are actively looking for voluntary retreat programs, for towns to try to test ideas for what works for communities. They have, as you know, they have significant money in that program. Multi-million-dollar grants are not uncommon. So one idea I thought of was, is there a way that we could set up a system where anybody who wants to sell their lot at East Beach to the town, these lots would go to the town. Now, I'm not suggesting they become private conservation; they become town-owned lots, and they get paid today. And if they don't want to be dealing with everything that's going on out there right now, they have an option for getting out. It's another version of that which has come up, which is really interesting. Instead of buying out lots directly, a lot of people want to stay there. I would too if I was them. So they want to stay there the rest of their lives. Could you buy the lot today, but with a reserved life tenancy, so the owner gets to stay for the rest of their life? So then you've got a version that is maybe a little bit more palatable, and also lets people be there for decades. But while this problem's going forward, and I don't know what the other couple of versions of that are. So I'm thinking of, do you pilot a program that tests a couple different ideas, only for people who really want to sell? It's just voluntary, and that's I put that forward. I think the deadline is going to be in June, I think, is coming up for MVP. If we wanted to put in a pilot program, something that might be able to just see whether or not residents are interested in this, I think it would be a winner with the grant. So I would like to see it considered as an alternative, not the answer for the total beach, but it could be one of many answers. So that's my thought on that.
Kevin, you got your hand up. You're on mute, Kevin.
Right. Sorry about that, gentlemen.
Yeah.
Ladies, a brief response to Mark, and I think I might have mentioned it when I first spoke, was is there any opportunities out there for nourishment versus acquisition?
I would hope so, but there aren't many. So, and I've been dealing with this very much directly. I don't know if you guys know. So, we own Barges Beach at the entrance to Cuttyhunk, which has been hammered very badly by these 3 storms, including a breach of the beach. And so we're like deep into this. How are we going to get the Army Corps to stop throwing away our sand and putting it back on our beach? Exactly the same issue that we're facing here in Westport, with not many good answers. So their cheapest alternative always is to dump it offshore. Their whole program is designed towards finding the cheapest way out of this stuff, is how I configure it. And I wonder whether or not there is a way that we could make a request for grant funds, which is, okay, Army Corps is going to do their thing. They've selected offshore disposal. We would like to instead pay the extra to get it on land. So can we just pay the delta, the difference? And so that's an idea I'm looking into. I don't have a grant source yet that is willing to do that I know of, but I support the idea, just like you guys.
Tony.
Hi, Mark. Yeah, so I was actually looking at a series of grants that had been issued, and I did see some grants that were issued related to the repurposing of dredging material for beach nourishment. So I did see that has been done. It was in one of the southern states. I can't remember where, but there were federal grants that had been issued for that type of thing. So I think there may be precedent that we could potentially try to discover and use, because it certainly makes common sense.
It does. It does. And Tony, if you can find any of that stuff again, I'd love to see it.
So let me just interrupt here. And I'm hoping and praying that Michael Burris and Amy are taking notes here, because I'm not in trying to keep control of the situation. But there's several recommendations or answers or suggestions that are flying around the virtual room here that I've heard. One is, when the town does the immediate response to a storm of making the road passable, it needs to think carefully about where the sand and cobble gets deposited to facilitate the beach renourishment. And the closer that it can place the sand and cobble to where it came from, the better. That's one idea that's been suggested by people. I hope I'm summarizing that as it was placed. Another is that when we dredge the harbor, that it's much better for that sand to end up on shore than it is for it to end up offshore, whether we're talking Westport or Cuttyhunk. And that involves picking a fight with the Army Corps. But Tony and Mark need to have maybe some more conversations about how that works, because it's an issue in more than one place, and two heads may be better than one on that. And then there are some people who want very much to just keep the same policy, stay here. There's a feeling we can stay here for a long time, but there may be others who might find a voluntary buyout, especially if there's a life tenancy, to be an attractive situation. I remember at the planning board meeting, someone, might have been you, Kevin, I don't know who it was, but someone at that meeting said, well, we know we might have to leave in 10 or 15 years, but we want to be there now. And there was some very eloquent testimony about what it means to be there in the summer. But a life tenancy allows that, for the rest of someone's life, and yet still allows recouping value and solving the problem 10 or 20 we're 30 years down the road. So there's been some good ideas. And if Amy or Michael Burris are keeping these down, then these are some of the ideas, and we're going to continue this next month, but we've got some more hands already up. Ray Raposa.
Yes. I remember that beach in the early 60s. So that would be about 20 or 25 years after the causeway was built. Today, that looks far different than it did in the 60s. With climate change, we're all thinking that the storms are going to get stronger and worse. I really think that beach nourishment is a losing cause. The storms are going to wash that away time and time and time again. As far as a citizen of Westport, I don't have a dog in the fight with a lot on that road, but I think keeping the road open might be the probably the most important thing. And I'm not so sure how long that's going to last and what it could look like. We're looking towards the future, 30, 40, 50 years. I'm not so sure we're going to win the beach nourishment thing.
Thank you, Ray. There's someone, the name says Jake McGuigan, but I don't believe it because there's no way that guy in the shirt and tie and the combed over hair is Jake McGuigan.
Yes,
I don't buy that for a minute.
I'm joining you from Annapolis, Maryland on a work trip, so I want to jump on here. But first off, I want to thank everyone that's involved in this process. This can become a very contentious issue, as we've seen over the years, and I believe that the discussions that we're having today will lead to better opportunities here kind of in the future as to how to address it. Whether it's voluntary buyouts, whether it's, looking at the nourishment. I did have a question for Mark and, through the chair, if I could. Has there been in the past on any of this beach nourishment, any of the areas that you have when it deals with a Army Corps of Engineer contract, where private landowners have paid to have it brought back in as, from a beach nourishment standpoint? Oh, he left. But Michael or anyone, I don't know if that's something that we can look at. Obviously it probably gets more and more difficult dealing with the, federal government on that. I'm sure it's, it's not just a situation where you can pay the difference, but I don't know if there would be grants with Buzzards Bay, with private landowners or anything like that to address that. But that's just my thought on that. But I appreciate the open discussion on this because it's a very difficult issue for the people at East Beach and for the town to continue to deal with. So I think we're heading in the right direction. Thank you.
Mark Rasmussen left the meeting and rejoined. Did you hear Jake's question, Mark?
I did not. I'm sorry. I keep on losing my internet connection. So, Jake, I heard the last sentence of what you were saying.
Yeah,
I'm
so
sorry.
Mark, I was just on these, basically these dredging projects. Have there been situations where private landowners have been able to request or help pay for the difference? I know it's probably difficult to do dealing with a federal contract with the Corps of Engineers, but I don't know if, you've had public or private matching funds to try to address something like this anywhere in Massachusetts.
Yes. Yeah. And it's actually pretty common on the Cape where neighborhoods pay for dredging of their own mooring basin or a channel that, the federal government doesn't want to do. They do a side channel. You can pay for it. You can pay for the extra. It's the cost though. The projects I've looked at, the cost in dredging is not the dredge picking it up on the barge and putting it out. It's the moving it onto land is where actually all the expense is. So you're usually looking at very expensive projects for the difference.
Okay.
So that's the challenge, but private entities can pay.
Okay.
Tony has put in the chat, NIFWIF, the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, is one source as well.
Yep. Yeah,
So-
the ones White had mentioned, thin layer deposition, there's a lot of movement to spend extra money to use dredge disposal for restoration of wetlands. So when that's the objective, but actually just when it's a public safety access kind of issue like this, private property, public safety access, like the road, that doesn't tick any of the boxes for wetland restoration. So that's usually the problem with NIFWF.
My only thought on that with Mark is push back on the fact that it's a barrier beach and protecting the wetlands on the riverside, right? I mean, if you solidify that a little bit more, at least you may protect the river, and same thing on the Cherry and website. So that's my only thought with that. But that may not fly in qualifications, but
yeah. Yep.
All right. Is that it, Jake? I'm going to expect you to look like that all the time now.
during legislative session, you will. January to June, I'll try.
All right, Constance, you're up.
Yes, after we help hammer out a sane approach to East Beach, might we do the same for Beach Avenue?
Yeah, I think now, Shauna, I think the select board asked us about East Beach, but was the idea all of the beach roads?
We didn't really talk about it like that, but I would say that if we're looking at a policy, we should look at a policy, right? So, but I don't know. I don't know if they're different enough that you'd have different policies. We didn't specifically ask for it, but I think it would be welcome.
They are completely different in terms of they're different and they're the same. The same is that they're just getting hammered with southern storms. And this last couple of storms that we had down here on Beach Avenue just took out the dunes basically and just covered the road. And of course, they dug it out another couple times and stuff. But every time they do that, it destabilizes what is left of the dunes. And of course, they were out, they were trying to dump the sand back on the beach, which was a nice gesture. But in doing that, of course, they're driving all over the beach with the trucks and everything, which of course they have to. But I just think it's time to revisit. It's a barrier. It certainly is a barrier beach. If East Beach is a barrier beach and Cherry and Webb's a barrier beach, certainly Beach Avenue is a barrier beach. And just the way that we're handling it seems that we are more intent on destroying it than anything else. So I would just hope that as part of our overall discussion, we're talking about how we handle barrier beaches, beach erosion, beach cobbling, all of that. I would really appreciate it if we could also have a time where we might discuss what's been happening on Beach Avenue. No one lives on Beach Avenue. There's no homes. There's, no anything. Nobody lives on Beach Avenue. So it's not like there is a reason to necessarily keep it open all the way out to the Point of Rocks or the Nubble. But anyway, may we please do that at some point, I guess is my question. Please.
Well, or a suggestion, but it's a good suggestion, Constance. So thank you for making it. All right, Tony, back up.
Hi. So this is an idea in a paradigm shift that I've developed over time with some inputs from a few different places. One of them is the Buzzards Bay Coalition Gooseberry study slide set, which kind of shows the coastline in this region, including Gooseberry, the Westport River mouth, Slocum River mouth, Allen's Pond River mouth, etc. And then other pieces here are inputs from Mike Sullivan and some other things that are happening in other communities. But when you look from the shore, the perspective is above the water line, and you see sand eroding, and you think, wow, that sand is gone, it has disappeared. But in reality, there's an ecosystem, and the sand is simply moved in the ecosystem. So the sand isn't gone, it's moved to a different location. And that's really integral to the Buzzards Bay Coalition study, because there's places that are getting, rivers, river mouths that are getting filling in and clogging and so on. And then other places where we would want the sand where it's been flushed away, right? So there's a movement from a useful place in the ecosystem to a hazardous place in the ecosystem. And I've always looked at this as, oh wow, we're helpless. This is a situation. It's tragic. We're helpless, right? In reality, there's two key points here. Key point number one is there is an argument to be made, and the study will answer this question, that the causeway itself, which is a, artificial construct, has accelerated or significantly contributed to the situation. Number two, it was a revelation to me to see that the Corps of Engineers is actually involved in some significant beach restoration projects where they pump the sand from offshore sandbanks, where the sand, may not be beneficial to shores that are being eroded where the sand originated from in the first place. So they're essentially moving the sand in the ecosystem back onto the beach where it eroded from. And they kind of plan their beach nourishment project to do this periodically. So it's just very interesting. And, it appears when I look at the BBC slide set that, that could be done with this section of the coastline where you have, Westport Rivermouth and then the sandbar that's near it, that are adjacent to, say, West Beach, where you have erosion. And then on the opposite side of Gooseberry, you have sandbars off of Gooseberry itself at Allen's Pond Rivermouth and Slocum Rivermouth, again, that are adjacent to the East Beach where you have erosion. So it's not unreasonable to take a look at that perspective. And what convinced me is the Corps of Engineers actively funded projects that just completed this past year doing this exact thing. And the sand pumping actually only took 2 months. It was very surprising how fast they were able to complete the project. This is in Atlantic City, by the way.
So Tony, one of the great things, I think, when Mark mentioned part of the results of this study is to have a model that tells us about sand deposition, is at the planning board, I think it was at the planning board, Bob Daler, who's not with us tonight, but heads our infrastructure subcommittee, said, let's say the study says something about the causeway. Well, that's one thing, but the causeway is owned by the state. Then it's a question of, can we persuade the state to do something? And then we can only imagine the kind of environmental impact statements and everything else and the timeline to get something done with the causeway. But the model then allows you to try all kinds of things and what their impact would be that don't involve construction. And you can go look at Mike Sullivan's report and look at other ideas. Like one of the ideas in Mike Sullivan's report is what would happen if you put a oyster reef offshore that would interrupt big breaking waves that cause erosion and might change circulation patterns that also might affect changes in sand deposition. I don't know how they would change it, but that's one of the things that the model would tell you without actually incurring the capital cost of doing it. So you could try different things in the model and see which ones actually impact things like erosion, things like movement of sand along the beach, before you're actually investing millions of dollars in carrying out these things. So I think the model of the Gooseberry study is going to be very effective in figuring out which are the things that we really want to put our chips on. Jake.
Mm-hmm. Just another point that Tony had brought up. I think obviously his point about the shifting of the sand is true. I see it all the time, and you see that our seasons have now shifted. I would tell you the best months at the beach, as long as you don't have a tropical storm or hurricane, are September and October for sand replenishment. The cobble is filled in, the sand comes in when you have those southwesterly breezes in the spring and summertime. I looked at that, plan that the Army Corps of Engineers has out there, and basically they're dumping it, in an area in front of Horseneck Beach. At the end of the day, we know that the sand's essentially moving from east to west into the mouth of the river. I don't understand if you're putting it there. I'm sure Bakers will get some of it and the town will get some, and it'll be back in the river. I think, unfortunately, that the shoreline of the state beach, with the maintenance outside of the scope of anyone on this call, but the maintenance being done or not being done at Horseneck on the shoreline, even if the sand came in, it's not going to fix the large boulders that are currently sitting there. It's a catch-22. You're going to fix the harbor issue in the channel, but you're dumping sand there. That's, I don't think, going to solve any problems. So to Chair Whiten's point, that I think, unfortunately, there needs to be a little bit of analysis on that. But the movement of the sand, I see it constantly. Last year was probably the best year for the beach, from Horseneck all the way to the river. It was in great shape. There was no cobble anywhere. 3 southeast storms changes that, and nor'easters actually don't help either, because it blows the sand back. But that shift, I see it occur every year, and hope that it comes back when we want it to come back. The beginning of the summer and the June timeframe, you still have a fair amount of cobble down there, but August and September, it looks a heck of a lot better. So I see their process of where they're dumping that sand, and I just, not an engineer, but I don't see it solving really any issues at Horseneck or anywhere else for that matter. I actually seen it going down and building up the sandbar between Bakers and Cherry and Webb, even more so, because that's where it's going to flow to. But that's me without an engineering degree. So
Thanks, Jake. Jim Whiten. You're on mute.
Just to double up on what Jake just said, last time they dredged the harbor about 14 years ago, they pumped it up on Cherry and Webb Beach up against the dunes. And then we had several big northeaster and easterly storms. The big high tide went up over the dredge material in between the dredge and the dunes and created a river that went directly back in the harbor, carrying all the sand that was just put there. And so all the sand that's in the harbor now came from the dredge material that they took out of the harbor, almost. So things don't last long. If you're going to put it on the beach, put it on the eastern end of the beach. I don't know about putting it all the way over on East Beach, because then you'd never see it again.
All right, Bob Daler.
Yes, John, I was being quiet tonight and listening, but I don't think the battle, based on my experience in other states, there's not going to be a particular federal battle, or the battle with the Corps of Engineers about dredging offshore and putting it on for beach nourishment. They do that in many states. It is a battle to be waged with the state DEP. It's against the state policy to do that, and in fact to work in the immediate nearshore area, either for beach nourishment or to create long linear shore barriers. And other states do it, and they do it successfully. And admittedly, they have to do it repeatedly, but they do it successfully. New Jersey does it, Florida does it, and they're all of them, keeping Port Everglades entrance cleared, Miami Beach entrances cleared, all of that stuff gets dredged offshore and put back onto the Miami Beach or the Jersey Barrier Beach, or Jersey shore beaches.
All right. Thank you. I don't see any questions, so I want to bring this meeting to a close. But there's one more thing we have to do. The next meeting, we usually go every 2 months, but we've got a lot of work to do. So I'd like, if it's okay with you all, to have this meeting in a month, which would be March 21st, sticking with a Thursday at 5 o'clock. And there'd be 3 items on the agenda, 3 main items on the agenda. And one would be to go through the second report, kind of the way we went through water today. And Joseph and Phil Weinberg, would one of you volunteer to bring either the ag report or the health report before the group?
Well, if I could just mention that we're going to be having a meeting on the 22nd of February with the Agricultural Resilience Committee. And so we'll make a few decisions then regarding a presentation that we'll be making in March to the Westport Grange, which has I think a membership of around 200. And so they would do a series of mailings. So we will be, I think, having that meeting in March. And then we'll have to synthesize all of the material and put it into the report. So we're still very much, even though the report is sort of lengthy, it still needs some finalizing in terms of reaching out to the farmers and to the fishers and getting additional feedback on their recommendations, impacts and recommendations of climate change. So,
Well, what's the date you're going to the Grange, Joseph?
well, we're going to discuss that on the 22nd, what would be best. You know, they gave us
22nd of February.
yes.
Do you think you'd be able to present to us on the 21st of March?
Well, depending, we're meeting with the Grange on the 22nd of February.
No, I know.
Well, potentially, I don't know how far along Phil is with his health committee. So
Well, what's the, I mean, with feedback of the committee, prepared an updated draft that was largely influenced by the 2 recent state reports on climate change and climate resilience. And, so I'd be able to, present that.
All right. Well, why don't we go with health on the 21st, and then we'll do an April meeting, and ag will do April. Ray, what are your thoughts, Ray?
Well, I prefer not to go next because we really haven't had an official meeting. I know Joe's done a lot of good work there, but as a group, we haven't discussed any of the issues or the report at all. So we're nowhere near ready to give a report to the group.
Well, I'd love to. I know as soon as we get into summer, Ray, it's going to get, or even late spring, it's going to get really hard for you guys. So when do you suggest on ag, Ray?
Well, we could go the next one after health.
Okay, in April.
That are going to take place the next month. We might have something we can put. Joe definitely has done a lot of work, but I'd like to discuss that as a group before we.
All right, so we'll plan March for health and April for ag, and then Bob Daler, we're kind of circling then with you in May. What does that look like? Well, maybe Bob is left. Oh, good. He's left. So we'll make him May because he can't object because he's gone. So we'll just note that down. Right, Jim White, and you're a witness, right?
I am. I will hold him to it. So
Okay. All right. Now, and then as a reminder, also next month, we'll see if we can resolve the issue of consistency on projections so we can make a decision and then stick with it. And then we'll also finish this discussion on recommendations to the select board on East Beach or Barrier Beach roads, however we want to end up with that. All right, with that, yeah, Mike, you're
Just
going to make a motion to adjourn?
I will, but do you want to pick the dates? Or maybe you already picked the dates for April and May. I've got the March 21st, 5 o'clock. And is it April 18th? I'm hoping because we have a watershed board meeting on the following Thursday.
April 18th would be the 3rd. Let me just take a quick look. I'm going to be on a boat. How about the following April?
25th?
I can't do that one either. How about an earlier one?
11th?
Oh, damn, that doesn't work either. Jeepers.
Well, you don't have to decide. I didn't have any dates, so maybe you can throw some dates out there when you get a chance.
Boy, these Thursdays around that. We'll find one. We'll find one. All right. Is there a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Second. Any
Second.
discussion?
Second.
Thank you all very much. This is a great meeting. Fantastic. Best record attendance. Thank you all very much.